So today I wanted to reshare some information that I shared on behalf of Performance Food Service last week when we opened the work sessions and webinars last Thursday. I'd also like to put in another plug that we are partnering with Virginia Community Capital and with several other organizations as well. But we will be having another series on Thursday at noon. And so we will be happy to share that information with you. But that is a great webinar series. And so last week we talked about reopening businesses with a focus really on food service, and decided that we really didn't have enough time to cover all this in depth, so we wanted to have another session that was just 100% dedicated to opening the food service industry. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the main issues that are affecting the food service industry right now. Right now, what we're seeing is that there's a truck driver shortage, and that has created logistic issues in back orders and slower delivery times. We know that there are protein shortages. The farms producing vegetables, that is in a better situation than it was, but in some situations, when there were employees that were diagnosed, it meant that there were large groups that had to be quarantined for 14 days because that individuals were working very close together. Also, the issue with food service industry is that, as everything shut down and their sales took a nosedive, they had to reduce their employees. So, they are short-staffed really still in every area. In the Southwest Virginia area, there were, with the one company, there were about 5 individuals that were sales reps, and now they are down to 2 individuals that are covering the same territory. So they are also short-staffed even in their distribution facilities. There has been a higher demand for packing supplies, obviously due to takeout. There is also going to be a reduction, we know, in seating capacity, and also, we foresee that there will be a reduction just in returning customers, just due to the fact that people are uncertain as to whether it is safe for them to be back out and eating. So obviously things, today are a little bit different. When we were preparing for this last week, we felt like that phase 1 for Virginia was going to allow restaurants to open back up, seating people inside. And of course, we know that is not the case during this phase 1. But the other question is, how long will the shortages last? I've heard some different things on this even through yesterday. But analysts are predicting that things will start to improve some in June. As far as Performance Food Groups has commented, they don't believe that things are going to be back in full swing and in a normal situation probably for quite some time. Long-term shortages will depend on improving bottlenecks at the processing and packaging plants, and that's of course what's caused a lot of issues with protein shortages. You should expect higher prices through the end of the year. So what should you expect in those food costs? We know that you're going to see inflated costs in protein, and that's really in all areas of protein, but particularly, we're seeing those prices going up on the beef side and pork side. Inflated costs in packaging supplies, seeing inflated costs with rice and beans or any kinds of foods that are being imported. So just to cover a little bit on the specifics of the shortages, Our family actually operated a food service business for over 30 years, so I have had a lot of experience in food service. And I think for small businesses, particularly as you're thinking about opening back up or expanding your service, understanding the supply and understanding pricing is so very important. But right now, what I have heard through Performance Food Group, and I think this is true all over, is that 90% of all boxed beef that you would purchase, which would be things like sirloin, ball tip, ribeye, top sirloin, any of your higher blends of ground beef, those are out of stock, and there seems to be not really a good back order date on that. For some of the lower grade beefs, they were seeing last week a back order date of the 17th, which would be next week. There are some issues with dairy. Obviously, we've all seen the stories about the dairy farmers that have had to pour out the milk. It does seem, though, that this is clearing up, that as the numbers with COVID-19 have fallen, that some of these processing plants are getting back to work, so that's a good thing. Right now with Food Service Performance Group, they are limiting all of their customers to 2 boxes of chicken per order. You know, if you are a business that sells a lot of chicken, you know that that is almost like having nothing. So they do hope that this is going to improve. Tyson is to be reopening. Pork, both the raw and semi-processed, things like bacon and ham, right now that is just pretty much extinct. Produce, with the Performance Food Service Group, they do own some of their own farms and have some private label produce. So they feel like they're in good situation on this. Excuse me. As far as seafood goes, they indicated that they had a good supply of frozen seafood and that fresh seafood was starting to come back in this week. They do now have oysters. Again, rice and beans are limited due to the fact that most of those are imported. Paper products, they indicated they saw a drain on those about 4 weeks ago, but that those products are catching back up. They also said, you know, expect that substitutions are going to be out of stock as well. So as you think about some tips for survival and success, you know, you're probably going to want to rethink your traditional menu offerings. You need to understand what that supply chain looks like. It may mean, you know, that you're having a different special every day or every week, and that's going to depend on what type of product that you can get. Some of the suggestions that they made was that, you know, you may want to limit your menu because your kitchen can execute dishes faster, your customers can order more quickly, it's going to reduce dead stock, lower your waste, which will aid in your food costs and your profit control. It's going to be easier to train new hires. If you have those, you can increase your turnaround, your profits, and have higher profit margin items. Certainly cooking methods and dishes also would allow food to be prepared in advance. If you have a set menu and you decrease those menu offerings, that's going to increase your speed of service and hopefully reduce your labor costs as well. And I did include Paul Conley's contact number in these slides. He is with Performance Food Service. He did indicate that they had picked up quite a bit of business and that they were able to source some products that some of the other food service companies had decided that they weren't trying to resource at this point in time. The other thing I really wanted to talk to you about was the dollars and cents of restaurants. Now more than ever, it's going to be really important for you to consider your prices and what your food costs are. Your food costs normally should run between about 28 and 35% of costs, depending on you know, what type of restaurant that you actually have. But the other things that you want to think about are your portions too large? Now, I will say this, that, you know, you don't want to make a drastic difference in your food portion cost because, you know, customers equate your food portion sizes with quality, and so you don't want your reputation to suffer at this. But it's very important that you are measuring, and that you have, if it's a 3-ounce serving of a side item that you're supposed to be ordering, that you make sure that your servers are using a 3-ounce spoon. It's very important that if you're serving them ground beef or a hamburger, that you have all of those pattied out and weighed to make sure that they are all the same. It's amazing, really, to realize that when you patty ground beef and you look at a patty and you think, oh, those are the same, how different they really can be when you actually weigh those two and compare them. So are a lot of customers getting to-go bags? That's something else to think about, you know. So what kind of food cost and supply cost do you have tied up in that? You want to consider that, you know, is it best to use paper? Is it best to use plastic? There's all different types of plastic that you can use. Do you have products that are being returned to the kitchen? You know, you want to make sure that if you see that there's a lot of food coming back into the kitchen, that maybe that does indicate that your portions, you know, might be a little bit larger than they need to be. Does your kitchen staff always allow recipe guidelines and plating examples? So that's, again, very important, that as you're training and retraining your kitchen staff, is that they understand clearly, you know, what that plate needs to look like, or in this case, as we reopen in phase 1 with takeouts. You want to look to see if dishes are priced accurately. That's really important, and you really need to understand your supply costs that you are incurring. And really, you need to look at your food costs every week, right now especially, because, you know, we do tend to see prices raising, and they are coming up and down a little bit, but still, as long as we are having some shortages, you're going to see some rising prices at this point in time. You also need to look at what your competition charging for a similar dish. Make sure that you're staying in line with them. Do you have a feel for what you're actually comping customers on, or is your wait staff forgetting to charge for add-ons and substitutions? So, you know, do you have a staff that is putting 10 ketchup packs in a bag for one order of French fries, when maybe they're only supposed to put 3 packs per order of French fries? So these are all things that are going to, you know, determine what your food cost really is, that you want to actually pay attention to. So I wanted to just real quickly go over just a quick calculation for, you know, calculating your food cost. Again, like I said, you really need to be looking at this weekly to keep an eye on this. But you want to look at your inventory value at the beginning of the first week when you start really looking at this. Add to that your purchases made during that period, subtract out the inventory value at the end of that period, divide that by your food sales for the period, and that is going to give you your food cost percentage. So you want to look to see if that is in that window of from 28 to 35%. And again, anything that you can look at to lower that food supply cost, again, is going to help your profitability. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was turning the tables. You know, that's going to be really important to us in Virginia, particularly when you get to phase 2. We do know now that if you have outdoor seating, that, you know, you are going to be able to have people eating outdoors. And if you do have outdoor seating, you know, this is going to be important to you now. But during the dinner period, tables are usually going to flip 3 times. That's about every 1 to 1.5 hours for a family restaurant. So if you figure 2 hours probably for fine dining, and maybe an hour and 15 minutes for a casual venue. But if you're looking at this picture right here, what this shows is it really shows seating for 12 people. But if you think about the new guidelines, first of all, you can seat no more than 10 people together. So if you were able to seat 10 people together as a party, you're only able to seat 10. You're losing two table sittings, So over the course of an evening, that's going to be 6 people. If you have a party of 4 that comes in here, then are you able to move these tables around so that you can put 6 feet between a table of 4 and any other table? So the point is that this is at least, going to cut your capacity for a while by at least 50%. So I wanted to show you this, in helping you figure out what your revenue is going to look like. If you look at your time frame that you're going to serve, and you look at the number of parties served during that period, and you probably, from history, what that typically looks like. If you divide that by the number of tables occupied during that period, that's going to give you your turnover rate. So as you are making decisions about reopening and bringing on staff again, understanding that there's a lot more sanitation that's involved, I would take the turnover rate, I would multiply that per day by what my average sale is to kind of give me an idea what my projected revenue is per day, and compare that to the expenses that you're going to have. I think that's really important going forward, because we do know that your capacity is going to be reduced, and we do know that as we move into these next phases and you are having to, sanitize quite a bit indoors or outdoors if you've got seating, that's going to increase the responsibilities on your employees. That also means it's probably going to maybe take an additional employee to be doing that while someone else is actually working on servicing and preparation of food. So some table turn tricks that you might want to look at. And I said tick, 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 because it's, you really have to think about this as, time and turns in tables equates to money. So are your servers getting to each table within 1 minute after seating? Is staff having issues turning the tables during certain times? Are certain sections and servers turning more slowly than others? Are dishes being cleared as each guest finishes rather than all at one time? I really would suggest that during this time that you communicate to your customers what things are going to be like, as they come in to dine with you, explaining that, we're working quickly to serve you, and in order to serve more individuals, we'd like you to be ready to order, and so that we can quickly serve you. I think you might want to consider, if you have these menus that you are discarding, or either you have a hostess who is posted outside in the waiting area where customers are coming in, that you allow that host or hostess to be your voice in letting them know what the expectation is when they come in to dine, and helping them to know if you have a special, or that you have a limited menu, so that they can start thinking about what they're going to order before they actually are seated at a table once you get to that point. Does your staff query whether guests are returning, saving time explaining the menu? That may be a little bit difficult to do, but again, I think if you utilize the host or the hostess, that you will be able to kind of communicate, what information they need before they sit down. Are servers making trade-offs with the check average? So again, it's very important to make sure that they are able to upsell on a check. Um, you know, perhaps you want to think about offering them some sort of a option of a dessert to go. You know, again, shortening the amount of time that they are actually sitting at a table and allowing you to turn that over more quickly. Could you invite customers to move to another area? I think this is going to be difficult right now. It might work as we get into another phase, but everything that I'm seeing is that even with the states that have moved into a phase where they have people coming in and sitting inside, that the bar areas are closed. But moving forward, you know, this may be something that you want to think about. Just making sure that you are turning over those tables as quickly as possible. So this is just kind of an example that if you had 20 parties and 5 tables, you're getting 4 turns during a 4-hour period. You know, that's a good number of turnovers. Again, if you look at your average check per person, that's going to really give you an idea of what your projected revenues are going to be per day, you know, and helping you really figure out, for you to be able to be profitable per day, you know, what does your labor costs need to be, what are your food costs, and helping you determine what the direction is for you.